Good day and welcome to Predators Proclivity, where we look at data from the season for the NHL Nashville Predators and make comments on it. Yes, I am your host, Preston Proctor. I am a little better today. I think my voice is better. I think the recording yesterday sounded really horrible. But I was committed to doing it because I should be committed. Again, I have to remember not to laugh. When I laugh, I still get a little bit problematic here. And so today is the continuation of Oh, Canada, the Preds are coming for you. All right. Yeah. We're playing Calgary tonight, and kind of jumping forward a little bit. The Calgary fans that I've met before, I just really enjoy hanging out with. When we would go to Kings games in the winter, buses of Calgary fans would come down and follow Calgary because normally they do the whole Southern California thing. They could play San Jose, then they'd play LA and Anaheim and Arizona. And so you have these busloads of Canadians that just do the whole trip, take a week off, whatever, and go watch the Canucks play through Southern California, which is great. We got to hang out with them. Our seats were next to a bunch of them, and they were a lot of fun. And then once we realized we both had an intense disdain for Vancouver, we could both gel on that. So I've always, my experience with Vancouver fans, not as good. They are very condescending people. I apologize. I have people that I do know that are Vancouver fans that live in the Seattle area are fine, but the ones I dealt with in the Vancouver stadium were annoying as, hockey sticks. Very condescending. I did not appreciate a lot of the fans in Vancouver. It was funny. We were crossing the border once to go up to a game, and we had our Kings stuff on, and the guy stopped us. We had to cross the border, and the Canadian guy's there, and he's asking us a bunch of questions. And so I just said, well, we're going up to see the Kings play Vancouver. I said, hope you're not a Vancouver fan. He said, no, I pull for Montreal. I don't really care. I got to stop laughing. But anyway, that was funny. I thought it was funny enough for me to share that anecdote. But anyway, so yeah, I always enjoyed meeting people from Calgary. Love to go to a game there sometime. Love to go up there and Edmonton. Not a big fan of Edmonton right now. I'm not especially after the loss last night. We'll get into that a little bit more, but I also think that during the Sedin twins' reign in Vancouver, that they were a team that practiced diving and were really good at it. I wasn't the one that made this up. They were widely known as the Canadian diving team. And they were just really good at it. You got anywhere near them, they'd fall down and draw a penalty. And I don't know why the NHL went along with it. I saw Dustin Brown get slashed in the back of the knee by Mike Smith, the Phoenix goaltender, and then get called for a diving penalty when he got slashed in the back of his knee. Meanwhile, Vancouver players are dropping like flies whenever anybody breathes on them, and we're getting called penalties. I just don't get it, but that's early on. Boy, that didn't take long. Hey, welcome. This is Predators Proclivity, not We Hate Vancouver. But anyway, so we've got road games tonight and Sunday. I'm gonna wrap up both of them today. I thought I could do all three yesterday. I could not. I wasn't quite sure today if I'd be able to get through it. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. So So last night, the Preds did play the second game of their 5-game road trip, an identical almost 2-3 overtime loss to Edmonton, wash, rinse, and repeat. The Preds got the first goal in the first, won the first, gave up 2 in the second, lost the second, got a goal in the third to tie it all up, and went into overtime and lost it. Connor McDavid did get his 1,000th point. Good for him. The way he got it, I have a problem with, just because it was a 4-on-4 scenario, and there was a turnover, kind of a stupid play, but turnover, and Brasalt, gosh, I can't. Dreisel. Goodness gracious, Stephen. Sorry, Preston. And goodness gracious. And so Dreisalt and Connor McDavid, gosh, talk about having your brain farts here, are skating in, and Lankinen is the defender. And maybe it's just the scheme that LA played. I think I've seen this with other teams, but my understanding is when you get in this 2-on-1 breakaway, the defender is supposed to take away the pass. Is supposed to do everything they can to take away the pass so that the goaltender can focus on the one carrying in the puck. That way, the goaltender only has to worry about one person. And Lankinen was just skating backwards with his stick out. Now, a lot of times you see the defenders go down to the ice and go, spread equal to keep them from being able to have an easy pass. And I thought that is what most defenders do. Lankinen did not do that, and I don't know if it would have mattered. But as it was, Dreisel made an easy pass to Connor McDavid, who had a wide open goal. Two very skilled players making a stick-to-stick pass because the defender is allowing them to. So I don't know what Wedgwood was supposed to do in that circumstance. I don't think there was anything he could do, but I think Lankinen could have done a better job. But there you go. And then the other goal in the second period, I think, was a testament to Wedgwood being new with the team and not necessarily being comfortable with his defense in front of him, because he took a look over his left shoulder to see where people were, and that's when Nurse shot the puck. So Wedgwood went to take a look over his shoulder and kind of eased away from the goal and created the opening that Nurse shot through. And I think that had Wedgwood been a little bit more comfortable with his defensive pairings, with the defense of the Predators, he would have just remained focused on that guy and reacted had the guy pass the puck. Now, not that Wedgwood necessarily did anything wrong. I think it's just kind of I think that's a new goaltender to the scheme, a guy who hasn't played a lot. And, I was just thinking this a few days ago. I think Wedgwood should be in goal a little bit more just to get him more reps. I think he got a little bit out of control again last night. He did against Colorado, wound up out of the net and behind it. And Preds players were sprawling across the crease in order to keep the puck out. And fortunately they did. But Wedgwood, I don't know if that's just the way he plays, because I haven't seen him play a lot, but if that's the way he plays, it kind of makes you wonder how he's an NHL goalie. I'm, just saying. Seems like he got a little bit out of control, and I think that if he had, I think the only way to get past this is just to have playing time. And I know Saros is the main goaltender. He's the number one goaltender for a reason. He should start ahead of Wedgwood, but I think that if, I guess maybe when the other team members are able to settle down, you can have Wedgwood come in and play. But, I mean, since the defensive pairings and the five-on-five play isn't buttoned up yet, it's better to have Saros in there when, there's a consistent person in goal that they can gel around. And then maybe when we can get, the fives gelling, then you can have Wedgwood play a little bit more and get him a little bit calmed down in the system. And, boy, that was just so sad to see because the Preds had taken the lead and they were playing so well and then, and then gave up those 2 goals. And you know how much I love Connor McDavid, so I would have been very happy if he had not gotten his point during the Preds game. But I'm not surprised that he did get a point. I was surprised he got a goal. But, yeah, I mean, he can obviously shoot the puck. So there you go. Winning 2 periods and losing 2 periods. I talked about this in the Colorado game. Only happened once last season, and that was at home, and it was a Preds win. And now it's happened twice in back-to-back games. So I went back and I said, okay, fine. Let me take a look at this scenario in last season and see what I can find out. Where the Preds score 1 in the first and the opponents get 2 in the second. And last season, that scenario, the Preds were 2-1-1. So it happened 4 times overall, not just on the road, 4 times. I said, okay, fine. That's a specific scenario. Maybe it's too specific. What if after 2 periods, the delta is -1? Say the Preds are down 1 after 2 periods. What does that look like? Well, that looks like 7-13-1. That was last season. 7-13-1 when losing by 1 after 2 periods. So, 33 ball, right? 300 baseball, 300, they won 7, lost 14, but 1 was in overtime, right? So, or 333 ball, I guess. I don't know why I'm pulling out baseball references. I don't actually like Major League Baseball. It's another very long discussion. Really long. We're not going to get into that. This season, being Delta 1 after 2 periods, the Preds are 1-4. But hey, they're not winning regardless. I guess it doesn't matter what the delta is. They're not winning very many games. So that's maybe not as statistically relevant, but it is looking like the trend that they are 2 times more likely not to recover from being down 1 goal at the end of 2 than they are. 4-1 right now, but it's only 5 games, so I mean, they can't really. It's trends. All we can do is trends. You can't really come up with statistics. It's just trends because lies, damn lies, and statistics. But it's tough to get a sample size of 20 when you only play 40 road games. But yeah, at some point the statistical relevance will be there. Overall, just in very particular situations, it won't be. But you can still look at trends, and so that's kind of what we do here. Okay, so that's breaking down my thoughts on last night's game and wondering, because 2 games in a row where they were Delta 1 and went to overtime and lost, I'm like, okay, here's a particular scenario. I wonder, what can I learn about that? And so there you go. All right. Well, last night was last night, and tonight is in the future. So let's look to the future. One of my favorite quotes: "Time is the thing that keeps everything from happening at once." Sorry. All right. In the future, tonight the Predators are on the road in Calgary to take on the Flames, the 8-6-3 overall, 5-3-0 at home Calgary Flames. The Flames are now fifth. They were fourth. They are now fifth in the Pacific Division with Edmonton getting the win last night. They are currently tied. 3 teams are tied at 19 points, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Calgary. Regulation wins is the first tiebreak, and Vancouver wins that 7-5. So Vancouver is ahead of both of the teams, and then regulation overtime wins is next, and Edmonton beats Calgary 9-7 in that particular stat. So that puts Calgary into fifth right now. Hopefully after tonight that doesn't change, but that's why we have time. Otherwise it would have already happened. Okay, so the Flames this year, they got out well. They got out well. Maybe I should say that differently. Winning their first 4. A couple games later, they had a 4-game losing streak. And then they've been kind of alternating wins and losses. They lost their last in Vancouver 1-3 after beating LA 3-1. They are 4-1-2 against the Eastern Conference and 4-5-1 against the West. 1-2-0 against our Central Division. The goalies have mostly been splitting time in net. Goalie Dan Vladar is 3-4-2, and Dustin Wolf is 5-2-1. Vladar did play in one game versus Nashville last year, a 3-6 win. Markstrom was their main goaltender last year. He was 1-1 against Nashville. But Vladar, who is still with the team, was successful. Vladar did play in the last game, so I'm expecting to see Wolf in goal tonight. I don't think the one game last year will matter. I think they seem to be on mostly alternating strategy. So. Oh, and so an injury update, a critical one for Calgary. Right wing Anthony Mantha is on injured reserve. He is undergoing season-ending ACL surgery, so he will not be available. But he is one of the guys that was carrying the team. He was one of the important guys on the team. Interesting transactions in light of the right wing Anthony Mantha being on IR. Right wing Adam Klapka was recalled from the Calgary Wranglers. And Markstrom, their main goaltender last year, is not with them. In June, Calgary traded him to the New Jersey Devils for defenseman Kevin Ball and a first-round 2025 draft pick. So they did not lose him to free agency. They traded him away. Their stat leaders. Center Jonathan Huberdeau leads in goals with 6. And this is one thing that I thought was interesting about Calgary's stats is that, like with the Preds, there's Forsbergs and Yossi for the main stats, and then, there's a couple other people. There's like they're a different name in every class here. So Jonathan Huberdeau leads in goals with 6. Left wing Andrei Kuzmenko leads in assists with 8. Huberdeau leads goals with 6. Kuzmenko assists with 8. Defenseman Rasmus Anderson leads in points with 11 and time on ice, 24-37. Center Nazem Kadri leads the team in shots, 54, and penalty minutes, 20. He also is last in plus-minus at -11 in 17 games. So, takes a lot of shots, gets a lot of penalty minutes, and apparently he's the guy to be on the ice. If he's on the ice, I guess you're going to score against them. Maybe he's shooting the puck at the wrong net. I don't know. But anyway, whatever. I mean, so he leads in teams in shot, penalty minutes, and he's last in plus and minus. Center/left wing, Justin Kurland, leads in scoring percentage at 33.3, 2 goals on 6 shots in 14 games. The right wing, Anthony Mantha, who is on injured reserve, was second in 26.7%, 4 on 15 shots, And leading in plus minus is Kirkland. It's not Kirkland, Kurland. Kirkland is Costco's brand. Kurland, right wing Matt Coronato, and the aforementioned Mantha at 6. Their plus or minus leaders are at 6. Tonight is Calgary's 18th game of the year. Ooh. Last year, the Calgary Flames were 7-8-3 overall. So far, they are 8-6-3, so a little better than last year. Their 18th game last season was a 4-3 overtime win in Seattle. Tonight is their 9th game at home. Last year, 4-4-1 at this point. 5-3-0, a little bit better. Again, so they seem to be having a little bit better season. Their 9th home game last year was a 2-1 overtime win over Vegas. And tonight is the beginning of a 4-game homestand for Calgary. They will get the New York crew of the Islanders Rangers in, and then Minnesota will follow that up. So Islanders, Rangers, and Wild. Oh, gosh. Oh, my throat might be better, but my brain is still sick. And so that's Calgary. That's tonight's opponent. Sunday night's opponent. Sunday night, the Predators will be on the road in Vancouver to take on the Canucks, who are 8-4-3, 2-3-3 at home. So there's hope there. The Canucks are 4th in the Pacific Division with 19 points, again winning the tie with Calgary and Edmonton on regulation wins, 7-5-5. The Canucks lost their first 3, won 4, and then are 4-4 in their last 8 games. They play Chicago tomorrow night, so Nashville will be the second of a back-to-back. So whatever stats change with Vancouver after tomorrow night's game are unknown to me. So their record will be a little bit different. But, yeah, so they're going to be the back-to-back. They are 3-3-2 against the Eastern Conference and 5-1-1 in the West. 1-0-0 in the Central. Their goaltender, their main goaltender right now is ex-Predator Kevin Lankinen, unrestricted free agent, signed in late September. I was following this a little bit. I think by the last podcast of last season. He was unsigned, and there was rumors that he was going to be signed by Vancouver, but I guess they were negotiating, and I forget. I was reading the Vancouver fan boards about this, and there was some reason why they thought maybe it was because Markstrom was the other team. Maybe I don't remember. Oh no, it was. Maybe it was because they lost their backup goaltender. I don't remember why, but there was a lot of belief that they needed to sign another goaltender, and Lankinen was the best out there. So after hemming and hawing and a bunch of negotiations in late September, they did sign him. He has gotten the bulk of the work, and he's 8-2-2. His backup, Arturs Solovs, is 0-2-1. Thatcher Demko is their main goaltender, and he was their main goaltender last year too. But he was on injured reserve. Went out on injured reserve in October, but even though he was in October, he didn't play any of the preseason games. I thought that was kind of interesting. He did play in the kind of jumping ahead of myself. He did play in the first game with Nashville in the playoffs. And that was it. He got the win, and then he didn't play anymore in the series. But anyway, so it was kind of interesting to look to see because they used all three of their goaltenders all in a row, and Solovs was 2-1 against the Preds in the postseason. He played in the last three games of the postseason, the series with Nashville, and he went 2-1. And so they've got their back-to-back with Chicago, and I'm guessing we're going to see Slavs against the Preds. Looking at Chicago, the Preds were 4-0 against Chicago. Lankinen was 2-0, did get two of those games and two of those wins. So he was 2-0 against Chicago last year. Last year he was with the Preds, so he didn't have any games facing the Preds. So I think what we'll see is Slavs in goal Sunday night and Lankinen in goal Saturday night against Chicago. Injury update. Goaltender Thatcher Demko is on IR since early October. Defenseman Derek Forbort is out. He's only played one game this year. He played 6 seasons with the Kings, so I remember him from those. And then, most important, right wing Brock Boeser is out. He has 6 goals and 5 assists. Looking at their transactions, they have when I do all of this, I look at transactions for every team just to see what's going on. I looked at Vancouver's, and they, it was like every day. Just about every day they're doing something, sending somebody up, bringing somebody down, bringing somebody up, sending somebody down, that kind of stuff. And it's just very busy. So it seems to me that Vancouver is a little uncertain in their lineup. That's especially with Brock Boeser going out. So I think, excuse me, man. I think they're having trouble coming up with their lineup, which is good news for Chicago. Maybe good news for the Preds. Anyhow, so they have recalled 2 people from the Abbotsford Canucks. The Abbotsford Canucks. They've recalled right wing Jonathan Lekkerimäki. I don't think it's Italian. I'm not going to try it again. And center, Atu Ratty. That's the best you're going to get out of me. So those 2 guys have been called up. So I think that they are buttressing their team in order to be flexible about trying to fill the spot. Stat leaders, here we go, Boeser and center Pius Suter lead the team in goals, 6. So, Boeser was one of their key guys. Defenseman Quinn Hughes leads the team in assists, points, time on ice, and shots. So thank goodness he's not out because I guess, for them anyway. He leads in assists with 13, points with 16, time on ice with 24.57, and shots with 55. Defenseman Philip Hronek leads plus-minus with 8. Time on ice, 23 minutes, and follows that up by leading in penalty minutes at 14. So he leads in time on ice and time in the penalty box. And plus minus. So maybe that means that most of the opponent's goals are scored on the power play when he's not there. In the offseason, Vancouver did lose their penalty minute leader. Last season, defenseman Nikita Zadorov had 102 penalty minutes. The person in second had 77. He got signed by Boston, so they're having to make up the penalty minutes somewhere. Boser and left wing Boser. I'm going to switch every time. And left wing Danton Heinen lead in scoring percentage at 23.1. Boser is 6 on 26 in 12 games, and Heinen is 3 on 13 with 15 games. So I think Boser being out is they're going to have to try to figure that one out. Last in plus and minus are two defensemen, Carson Soucy and Noah Jolson, sorry. I think that's right. Okay, let's move on. Sunday is Vancouver's 17th game of the year. They do play at home tomorrow night. So tomorrow night will be their 16th game. My overall this year where they're at is the numbers are going to be a little short because it's not going to take into account tomorrow night's game. But 17th game of the year, Sunday night. Last year they were 12-4-1. That's pretty good. This year so far they're 8-4-3. So they are a little behind in the win department. Their 17th game last season was a 2-5 loss in Calgary. This year, they're 8-4-3. Sunday is their 10th game at home. Last year, they were 8-1-1 after 10 games at home. Their 10th home game was a 3-1 win over Anaheim. And this year, they are 5-3 at home. Tonight's game is the 5th game of a 6-game homestand. They are 1-2 so far. Edmonton, they lost 3-7. Calgary, they won 3-1. They lost to the Islanders 2-5. They play Chicago on Saturday, and then they'll finish things off after the Preds on Sunday night with the Rangers on Tuesday. All right, so now let's talk about the Predators. The Predators are now 5-9-3. On the road, 1-3-3. 8 teams in the league have 3 overtime losses. There is the Islanders lead the league in 4. At 3, you can find Minnesota, who is 3rd in the NHL with 25 points. So just having 3 overtime losses is not necessarily a bad thing. As far as the road record goes, though, only the Blue Jackets have a worse road record at 1-5-2. The Preds are 8th in the Central Division with 13 points. They lose the tie with Chicago. They are currently tied with Chicago because they have one less win. Chicago does play tomorrow night, but hey, the Preds play tonight. So if they win or get a point, they could jump ahead of Chicago. They could be out of the bottom of the Central Division for a day, at least. Last night's tie vaulted the Preds past the Columbus Blue Jackets, Anaheim Ducks, and Montreal. Oh, come on. Never mind. What's the Toronto Maple Leafs? Oh, goodness gracious. But anyway, so there are 3 teams in the bottom behind in the league. Canadians, there we go. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Oh, Canada. Jeez. So there are 3 teams now below the Preds. And could be more with a win tonight. The Preds are 2-4-1 against Eastern Conference, 3-5-2 against the West, 0-4-1 versus the Pacific. Last night was the first point that the Preds have gotten against a Pacific Division team. That's hopefully we'll keep that ball a rolling. Sunday's game is the 4th game of a 5-game road trip. They are 0-2 so far. Played Colorado Monday, Edmonton on Thursday, Calgary tonight, and Seattle on Wednesday. I mentioned yesterday they had a similar road trip, games 9 through 13 last year, Vancouver, Seattle, Edmonton, Calgary, and Winnipeg. Their only win was in Edmonton in that 5-game road trip. So we're not going to duplicate that concept this year. But hey, that just means there's opportunity for something different. Tonight is the Preds' 19th game of the year. Last season, the Preds were 9-10. 9-10 in their first 19 games. Woohoo! Almost 500 ball. 500. What would we call it? 500 puck. What would you call that in hockey? 500 puck. Oh, the 500 ball. 9-10 in their first 19 games. Their 19th game was an 8-3 win, or spanking. Yeah, right. Win in St. Louis. They're 5-9-3 overall right now, so they're a little behind last year. Tonight is the Preds' 9th away game, and last season they were 3-6. In 9 road games, they've got the chance of being there if they win tonight and Sunday. The 9th game was the aforementioned St. Louis game. Injury update, not much has changed. Center Tommy Novak is still day-to-day. No new transactions. Stat leaders, Forsberg still leads the team in goals and points. None of that changed, 8-13. He's now tied with Yossi at 64 instead of being second at 63. I guess Yossi didn't get any shots last night. Defenseman Roman Yossi leads the team in assists, 11. He's tied in shots at 64, and he leads time on ice, 25-26. Center Gustav Nyquist leads the team in shooting percentage, now down to 26.3%. He took a shot and didn't score. He's 5-on-19 with 17 games. And in plus and minus, defenseman Mark Delgazzo, right wing Luke Evangelista, center Philippe Tomasino lead the team in plus minus at 1. Still nobody even at 0. Colton Sissons now has the bottom to himself at minus 13. And McCarron still leads the team in penalty minutes with 23. The Preds stats on the road. They are 1-3-3 on the road, losing their last road game last night, yada, yada, yada. Last year, the Preds were 1-3 in overtime games, getting the first goal in 2 of them. This year, they're 0-2 on the road, in overtime on the road, 1-0 at home. Three. Forgot to update that number. They're 0-3. So far, the Preds are 7-10 in getting the first goal. I think I was calculating that, strangely enough, incorrectly. But now they're 7-10 in getting the first goal. So that's almost 500. They're 2-3-2 when they get it. They got it in the last 2 games. They're 2-2 when they get it at home, and 0-1-2 when they get it away. 3-6-1 when they do not. 2-4 at home, and 1-2-1 away. Last year, after 19 games, the 9-10 Preds were 11-8 in getting the first goal. Overall, 6-5 when they did get it. 4-2 at home and 2-3 away. 3-5 when they did not. 2-2 at home and 1-3 away. Winning by period this year has gotten a little different with the last 2 games. They've won the first and third and lost the second. So their record in the first period has gotten better. They're 4-6-7 in the first period overall, 6-9-2 in the second, 8-7-2 in the third, and 2-3-2 in the first on the road, 2-4-1 in the second, 3-2-2 in the third. So the third period record is looking better. Well, they're 0-3-0 in overtime. So their overtime record's not looking very good. They're 1-3, 1-3-0. I guess you can't tie in overtime. But yeah, I guess I don't need to do that. They're 1-3 overall in overtime. So in general, their special teams play is better than the other teams. But for some reason, 3-on-3 in overtime, they're not. I don't know. Oh, shoot. Just remembered something I forgot to do. I've been working on a special team spreadsheet because I want to understand special teams a little bit better. And one of the things that I had accommodated for was empty net situations that occur during the game. So on a delayed penalty, you can pull your goaltender without worry unless you shoot it into your own net. And that happened last night and in Colorado, and Colorado and Edmonton were both able to maintain the puck for a significant amount of time. And they could have scored. They did not score. Neither of them did. But I've been tracking that, and I forgot to look that up for last night's game. So I remember to go do that. That does not change anything that I'm telling you today, but it is something I meant to do, and I didn't do it. So I guess it can go into that column of something I meant to do before the broadcast that I forgot to do. All right. That total isn't too high yet this year. Anyhow, so their first period record is getting better because they've won the first period. They've been getting the first goal, but it hasn't been resulting in changes. The play in the second period is starting to look a little more problematic, at least right now. I think in general, the overall play, like last night they played well. It was a very quick game. They seemed to have their wits around them and whatnot. And then the problem was whenever they didn't, it didn't always result in a problem. But I mean, when things kind of broke down, there was the one circumstance, the 4-on-4, the 2-on-1, where it caught up with them, and they did not have that against. They did not get that advantage. So there was kind of a mental breakdown or something in the team. The turnover did not help. Yeah, so that was second period. Those long-term or even short-term listeners of the podcast know that one of the reasons why I started this podcast was because last season I was going to the Preds games, watching the Preds games, and I kept thinking that they played poorly in the second period, and I thought, well, geez, am I right or am I wrong? And so I said, okay, fine, I'm going to bring out my spreadsheet, I'm going to set up the schedule, I'm going to start tracking this stuff, I'm going to figure it out. Well, it turns out I was right. The second period was the worst period for the Preds last year, and specifically at home, they were even worse than they were on the road. And so now I'm starting to wonder if we're starting to see that come back. They're not exactly playing the best in the first period. They're getting better. But, I guess just, the team just hasn't come together yet. And so once the team comes together, then I guess we can get a little bit better view of all this. But right now, they seem to be taking control of the first period, and it's not paying off. Before, I think it was 1-6-7. I think they've won the first period of the last three games. So it was 1-6-7, and then the other two periods were fairly the same. I think 5-7-2. And so the second and third period looked not great, but good. And then the first period, just 1-6 and 7. It's like, and then if they were losing after if they weren't winning. I mean, they're just not winning. So when they're just not winning, I mean, how can you come up and figure out that's how they lost? Because nothing tells you they're going to win. But just trying to look at trends and try to see what they can do, just from a numbers standpoint. I haven't played hockey. I think I mentioned I have played a lot of basketball, and so and a fairly decent defensive basketball player in my day, and never been much of a scorer, but a defensive player. So I understand. Being in the zone and understanding where other players are and where the offensive token, the ball or the puck, where that is, and your relationship to what your particular defensive scheme is, and how you need to respond to events that happen as they go. And so I have an awareness of that, not at the professional level, but I have played a lot of basketball. I'm just going to leave it there. But anyhow, so winning goal. Yeah, funny. Right now, on the road, 43% of the time, the winning goal is scored in overtime. Not really going to put much stat. That's the way it is right now. 29% in the second and third. The Preds have only won one, so 100% of the time, third period. 33% of the time when the opponents win, it's in the second. 50 in the overtime, and 17 in the third. Those are not numbers that we're going to see long term. I would expect to see something close to what we did last year. I'll repeat this again. 40%, 41% of the time, it was in the second period. Comparing that at home, at this point, I don't think I've done this in the show. At home, the second and third periods were fairly even, 32 and 34%. So roughly a third of the time even. You didn't have anything that big of a swing, right? 32%, the Preds would get the winning goal in the second. That was something that was interesting. The highest percentage for the Preds was in the second period at home and the third percentage on the road, and switch that, right? So at home, the opponents would get the higher percentage would be in the third period, and the on the road it would be away. So the home team, the higher percentage was to win in the second period, and the visiting team in the third. If we want to look at it like that, when it was the Preds, 42% of the time on the road, they would get the goal, and 40 to 44% of the time when the opponents were on the road, so 42 to 44%. Now that sounds close. And a pretty good number. And then at home, the Preds would where am I at? At home, the Preds in the second period would be 39%, and the opponents were 65% in the second period. That number just kind of jumps out at me. 65% of the time last season, when the Preds won, when the other team won at home, at their home, so the goal was scored in the second period. That really jumps out at me. So I would expect to see numbers more like that. And so I guess just kind of doing this inference, I guess the higher percentage would be to expect the home team, if they're going to win, to get the game-winning goal in the second period, 40 to 50% of the time, and I guess 40% of the time the visitors would get it in the third. So, and that would be the prevailing trait. So I guess I wonder about that. So if you're the home team and you're not winning at the end of the second, your chances for winning are pretty low. But I think if you're not winning at the end of the second, your chances of winning are fairly low anyway. It doesn't mean that you're home or away. I haven't really looked at those numbers from that particular standpoint, kind of inverting it and saying these aren't home and away. This is the opponents at home. And so it's a home-home comparison, the Nashville at home, the opponents at home. That's an interesting way to think about this. I'll have to kind of I'll have to switch things up a little bit. Okay. The numbers, overall, now the numbers, especially with the last two games, the numbers, the scoring, the goals scored per period, the differential in the second period is going up by 7 goals now. And that is not going to be rectified by accounting for empty net goals, which I was working on this morning and then realized that I really needed to think about what I was doing because I wanted to take the third period goals and then pull out the empty netters and get the same ratios and understand the normalization and make sure I had all of that stuff done, and just decided I didn't have time to do that with the energy that I had for today and still talk about these two games. So I'm still working on that. But the empty net goals are 4 to 6. The Preds have gotten 4. The opponents have gotten 6. So if you pull those out of the overall totals in the third period, and it becomes 11 to 12 in the third period. So the number of goals scored in the third period is not that out of line. Right now it's just 3 anyway, overall, and 3 in the first and 7 in the second. So the 2 goal, but that's heavily biased by the last 2 goals being outscored by 2 goals in the second period in the last 2 games. But, looking for trends here, right? So, so that's the overall standpoint, which is something that we've got starting to get enough data points that you can look at something as statistically significant instead of being something that's just a trend. And if we look at there's one empty net goal on the road, and that it's even on the road 4 to 4. But on the road, the second period again 6 to 10. But we've been outscored by 4 goals in the last 2, 3 to 6 in the first period. So I don't really. Those 4 goals. If you take those last 2 games out, if we don't count the 20 games we lost, we're doing a pretty good season. But that's one way to look at it. You can infer certain things from that. Anyhow, just like when the Preds win, they score 3 goals. When on the road, they have 1 win. On the road, they won 3 to 2. So it's a data point. Okay. I think the scoring overall is, by period is not so bad. I think I was just looking it up. I think the goal differential, it's 15, which is heavily biased by the second period right now. It's 7, and minus 15 is not the worst in the league, but it's bad. Was it Dallas that's looking at the league and then looking at goal differentials. It's at Boston. Boston is at minus 16, and they're 8-8-2. Minus 16 is worse than the Preds, but they're 8-8-2. How the heck do they do that? But anyway, they're 8-8-2. They're 18 points, and what does that put them? That puts them Boston. Third in the Atlantic with 18 points. They're third in the Atlantic. They're in a playoff position with a differential of 16. Boy, that looks interesting. Would they have like one game where they got like shellacked or something? Possibly. It could be 6-4, 2-1, 5-2, 7-2. Ooh, they lost 7-2. Dallas 3-2 in overtime, 4-0. Well, that'll start to, they put them all 8-2 against Carolina. So they stacked those 16 all in 3 games. Well, that's what you want to do. If you're going to lose, and there's only a finite number of goals that your opponents can score against you, then put as many of those goals into that game as you can. I know that's not how it works, but I mean, it's a funny way to think about it. Anyway, so that looks like what Boston has done. So, again, the fact that there's a goal differential of 15 is not saying that the Preds are bad, because Boston, third in the Atlantic, about halfway in the league, in a playoff position, has 16, is negative 16. 3 overtime losses, does not, like Minnesota, third in the league with 3 overtime losses. None of these particular statistics in and of themselves would lead you to say, oh my gosh, this team has to be in the bottom. Okay. None of the top teams in the league have a negative goal differential. So you could say from the negative goal differential, they're probably not in the top third of the league, but that particular stat in and of itself is not going to say, hey, the Preds should be one of the last teams in the league. So, but anyway, so just because they have that, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. There's lots of good pointers too. Their special teams play has been good, except in overtime. But their special team play has been pretty good. The opposition had more power play opportunities, 32-24. But the Preds have more goals, 3-2. Just very, guys, I guess a little bit of bad timing. Last night, the Preds had the top-ranked penalty kill, or have the top-ranked penalty kill in the league, and Edmonton has the worst. But in one power play, the Preds couldn't score. That would have been good. That's the team that you ought to score against in your special teams. Anyway, so so instead and then they had 2 goals 4-on-4, and the opponents didn't have any. And so last night Edmonton got the first 4-on-4 goal against the Preds. So for special teams, the Preds have been playing well, even though they don't seem to be able to figure out how to play as a 5-man unit. When they get less people on the ice, they're fine. I don't know. Okay, so anyway, so those are the 3 teams. There's your teams. There's the Calgary Flames, there's the Vancouver Canucks, and then the Nashville Predators. And so tonight is the game against the Flames. It's the first game against the Flames. They will come to Nashville in mid-December, and then we'll play in Calgary again in early January. Last year, the Preds lost the one away game. This year, we've got 2. Lost the away game 2-4. Won the first game in Nashville in November, and then lost to them in Nashville in January. Interesting, in the games against Calgary last year, the Preds scored 2 goals in the first period of all 3 games. They didn't score in the second period of any of them. So they always had 2 goals by the end of the second period. Calgary only had 2 scoreless periods to Nashville's 4. So that's a little bit of the looking at last year's games. Calgary starts a 4-game homestand. They're 3-2-2 since their 4-game losing streak. The Preds have played 2 games in a 5-game road trip. They're 0-2 so far. They're 1-3-2 in their last 6. Saros was 1-2 versus Calgary last year. Played them 3 times. He was the goaltender all the time. Expecting to see Saros in goal again. And Wolf for the Flames. Calgary will be a little short without their right wing, Anthony Mantha. So hopefully the Preds defense will stand up and the offense will figure out where the net is. I don't think they change where the net is. I don't know. Similar, Sunday night's game is similar because they're missing a player too, and it is also the first game against the Canucks. We'll play again in Vancouver in early January, and then late January will be the only game in Nashville. Last year, the Preds lost all three against Vancouver in the regular season, 2-3 in Nashville, and Vancouver 2-5, both of those games. The Preds faced Vancouver in the playoffs and lost 2-4, both wins being in Vancouver. So maybe some good memories about playing in Vancouver. In the regular season, the Preds didn't get the first goal ever and had a lead for just over 4 minutes total, and that was just in one game. Unfortunately, the time the Preds have for a lead this season is similar to the series with Vancouver. Hopefully we can right both of those. That is the wrong. That I should have deleted. That was Calgary. Cut and paste error there. In the playoffs, the last two games, so the last two times that Nashville faced Vancouver, the games would have been in Nashville and then Vancouver, the last two. The only scoring was in the third period, and the Preds are 1-1 in those two. The win in Vancouver. So the last time we faced Vancouver in Vancouver was a win for Nashville, with the only scoring being in the third period. I don't expect that Sunday night. The Preds also got the first goal in the first two games, and they were both losses, also both in Vancouver. Goaltenders. In the regular season against the Preds, Demko was 2-0, and DeSmith was the backup last year, and he was 1-0. He was an unrestricted free agent signed by Dallas, which is another reason why they needed another goaltender and wound up signing Lankinen. In the postseason, Demko was 1-0, but I guess he was injured and then called day-to-day. Read a little bit about that because I thought it was weird. Their starting goaltender played one goal, was not on injured reserve, didn't even show up for the second game. Not exactly sure. But Demko was 1-0, and then DeSmith came in for the next two games, was 1-1, and then they put in Soloves. Keep spelling it Silvos, but it's Soloves, and he was 2-1. That's they played three goaltenders against us last year in the playoffs. And Vancouver is near the end of their 6-game homestand. They're 4-2-0 in their last 6 games. They lost Thursday versus the Islanders, and they are playing Saturday against Chicago. The Preds Sunday night will have played 3 games of this 5-game road trip. They are 0-2 with Calgary tonight, and they are 1-3-2 in their last 6 games. I expect to see Saros in goal for the Preds. Soloves, I spelled it right that time. For the Canucks, Vancouver will be a little short without right wing Brock Boeser. So hopefully, just like I think that the two games, the Calgary and Vancouver games, are going to be very similar. With one caveat that Vancouver will have just played. Calgary has been off for a few days. Meanwhile, Nashville is playing a back-to-back. And so both teams, I think, will be struggling a little bit with their lineup. I think Vancouver especially, they've been kind of sending people up and bringing people down. Well, they bring everybody down. Okay, so maybe that's a little cheap, but I think it's funny and I think well-deserved. Anyhow, so I think both games should be competitive. Yeah, that's what I call, when maybe not the best hockey, but the Preds played really well last night. I think last night's game was a good contest. The Colorado game, again, a good contest. So I think it's going to be good hockey. I think we'll see good hockey tonight and Sunday night. And I think really that the stars are starting to line up for the Preds, and they're going to start getting their act together a little bit. I think the kind of miscues that they had against Edmonton and Colorado won't be as bad for them against Colorado and Vancouver. So it's a little bit of a relief that hopefully they won't make miscues. That would be better. But, it's hard not to make any mistakes in the entire time that you're playing. It's just, that's just how it goes. But anyhow, I think both games are going to be good. I think the Preds have a really solid chance of coming out of this with 2 wins. Be nice. They have gotten points in both their games, which is kind of what you want. I mean, you want to rack up all the points you can get. It'd be nice to rack up a few wins too. So I think the Preds have a good chance at doing that. All right. So tonight, Calgary Flames, 7:30 Central, a little bit later than last night. Not sure of game time for Sunday, but probably 7 o'clock Central. And we'll be playing Vancouver. Thanks for listening. I'm Preston Proctor, and you've been listening to Predators Proclivity.